What do you think? What has changed in this group of G7 countries after Russia was kicked off? And we remember then Donald Trump, the ex-president of the United States, it was attempt. He tried to bring Russia back, but the other countries refused.
Yeah.
And what has changed in this group since the Russia left?
Well, basically nothing, because as I said, Russia's accession to G7, when it became G8, it was, it was an ad hoc decision to grant Russia some kind of world status in order to bring them closer to Western countries. Because at the time when this decision was made, these were times when the idea of Russia, I mean, the perception of Russia was very different from today's. So we need to remember that these were times when many European countries and some, I would say that some American leaders as well, considered Russia as a partner, a long-term partner.
And still, some of them
today
still
it's
consider them as a partner.
Some of them, but it's more, today it's a marginalized idea. Today, it's not very popular to say something like that. But back there, back then, I mean, it was an idea which everyone believed in. That they thought that Russia is their partner in Eastern Europe, which would help them build some kind, of a stable security architecture in Eurasia. And when Russia's membership in G7, its accession in G7 club, was payment to Russia for, they thought that if we integrate Russia closer into Western-led structures like G7, like NATO, you remember when there was Russia-NATO Council created, and I think they canceled it. They canceled this format only last year, if I remember right. So yeah, this all was part of this idea that we need to integrate Russia. We need to work together with Russia on setting up a new security architecture in Eurasia. Now it's gone, and so I would say that this idea is dead. I don't believe that Russia is going to return to G7 in any capacity in future. Because first of all, as I said, this is a marginalized idea. It's not very. It's unpopular. And secondly, I don't think Russia is interested anymore, because they think of themselves that the West is their enemy, and since the West is their enemy, they cannot be integrated into Western-led structures.
If we look at each of these countries from which consists this G7 group, what do you think? Are there any disputes within these countries regarding the support for Ukraine? Who is Ukrainians' biggest and closest friend, if we might say?
I would say the United States and Western European, and EU countries. So EU and NATO, these are the biggest donors and partners of Ukraine in the context of this war. Of course, there are certain differences between them in terms of how they perceive Russia's threat, how they see Russia, in future. Like, for example, if you take Poland or Romania or Baltic states, they mainly see Russia as a long-term military and political threat, no matter how this war will end. While in the United States, I think that there are different views on Russia, including people that still think that Russia can be integrated as a partner, after this war. So they believe, for example, there are countries in Western Europe that believe that Russia is capable of that democratization of Russia is something.
They believe in this process.
Yeah, they believe in this. They think that this is something that we just need to wait, that this will happen. And after this happens, we can return to normal dialogue with Russia. While other countries like Poland, they don't believe it. So I think that there are certain differences, of course, which is normal, because these are different countries, different political elites, different interests, different perceptions. And this is all about perceptions, history, something like that.
Let me ask you about the head of the European Union diplomacy, Josep Borrell. He was a participant on the G7 meeting, and he said that European Union countries should be politically ready to continue supporting Ukraine against the background of the events in the Middle East, especially if the support from the USA is reduced. Do you think are they ready, European countries?
That's a good question because, well, I think politically, he said politically, yes. I think politically they are ready to continue supporting Ukraine. I don't see any upcoming changes in that position. And now, economically and financially, militarily, I think the European Union is, as I said, is limited.
It looks like the USA, like Ukrainians' biggest supporter and ally, is just trying to replace the responsibility for this war in Ukraine for the European Union.
I think this is my understanding of what European politicians are afraid of, because they all try to see and try to understand what is going on in the United States, and whether the United States will be ready to continue supporting Ukraine at the same level as it has been for the last, almost 2 years. So I think the European Union is ready to support Ukraine, but they have their own limitations. They have limits in their capacities, and of course, if the United States, everything will depend. It also will depend on who is going to win American elections next year. Because if it's going to be, for example, Trump, I think he and his fellow Republicans will try to convince the EU countries to give Ukraine more, so that to reduce their own support. And this is something that the European Union is trying to think ahead of how they can do that without
adjust this situation.
Without alienating their own social base, their own support base in the European countries, because they have also their own elections, their own people, their own interests. And so, of course, they don't want to, for example, find themselves in a situation where they have to pay too much.
It's like warming up exercise,
Yeah, I think that's why Josep Borrell brought up, this question on G7 summit. Again, as I told you, the G7 summit is a perfect opportunity to speak about this in order, between different countries of the so-called collective West.